Have you ever felt that no matter how carefully you express yourself, no matter how precise your reasoning may be, there are always people who simply refuse to take you seriously? It is as if your words bounce off an invisible wall, as though the truth inside you is too quiet for a world that only seems to value noise. Carl Jung once said that people don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that principle applies even here. The path to respect does not come from shouting louder, but from bringing clarity and strength to your words. Most of us were taught that respect must be demanded through force, through dominance, or through the sheer volume of our voices. But the truth is different. Real respect is not forced, it is inspired. Jung believed that the human psyche responds to authenticity, not to posturing. When you speak with alignment between your inner self and your outer voice, people recognize something deeper than authority. They recognize truth. Imagine walking into a meeting, a heated family argument, or even a casual conversation with friends. The room is full of noise, opinions colliding, egos competing for attention. Yet with a single sentence, spoken calmly, firmly, with the weight of conviction, you cause the entire room to fall silent. No raised voice, no aggression, just words so carefully chosen and aligned with your true self that they cannot be ignored. That is not magic, it is psychology. It is the archetype of the wise ruler, the inner king or queen that Jung described, emerging to guide the situation without needing to dominate through force. The Stoics said it well. Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. And when it comes to respect, this teaching is essential. The more reactive you become, the more power you lose. But the more calm and precise your words are, the more others are drawn to listen. Jung also observed that the person who cannot command themselves cannot command respect from others. It begins within. Think about the figures who truly marked history, not those who shouted the loudest, but those who spoke with calm conviction. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, guided an empire without losing his composure. Nelson Mandela, after decades of imprisonment, spoke with forgiveness instead of rage. Their authority came not from force, but from the authenticity of their words. Jung would say they embodied the archetype of the self, the integrated personality that radiates wholeness and balance. In modern life, the principle is the same. In the work meeting, a disagreement with your partner, or even when speaking to a stranger who tries to test your boundaries, you don't need volume to be respected. You need alignment. The right words, spoken with serenity, become stronger than any shout. They bypass defenses and pierce directly into the psyche, the way an arrow pierces a shield. And this is what we are going to uncover today. 5 phrases, born not just from clever rhetoric, but from a deep psychological truth that will transform the way people perceive you. These are not tricks, they are tools, psychological instruments that shift the balance of power in any interaction. They align with the Stoic idea of dignity and the Jungian principle of individuation, becoming so whole and integrated that others cannot help but notice. Phrase 1. I understand your point, but I disagree. It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? And yet, it carries immense psychological weight. Why? Because it demonstrates 3 things at once: that you listened, that you respect the other person enough to acknowledge their view, and that you hold your ground without being defensive. Picture this: you are in a meeting, and someone proposes an idea you know is flawed. The usual response would be to say, "That's wrong," or to remain silent. Both of those options cost you power. One creates unnecessary confrontation, the other makes you invisible. Instead, you look calmly at the person and say, I understand your point, but I disagree. That one sentence shifts the entire dynamic. You have validated their humanity, but you have also asserted your independence of thought. You've shown that you are not intimidated by authority or peer pressure, and yet you refuse to be aggressive. Jung might describe this as balancing the opposites within yourself, the shadow of aggression and the mask of submission, integrating them into a single, calm expression of your will. This phrase is powerful because it communicates boundaries without hostility. It separates emotion from judgment. It shows that you have self-control. And as Jung wrote, the person who masters himself becomes a force that others instinctively respect. In fact, when you use this phrase, the silence that follows often speaks louder than the words themselves. People notice. They may not admit it, but inside they recognize, here is someone who thinks independently, and here lies the deeper truth. Respect is not given to those who demand it. It is given to those who embody it. By calmly asserting your perspective, you awaken in the other person a psychological recognition of strength. They may not like what you said, but they will remember it. And in that remembrance, respect is born. Jung believed that the individual must stand apart from the collective in order to become whole. This phrase does exactly that. It allows you to step out of the tide of conformity and show that your identity is strong enough to disagree without fear. You are not swept away by the crowd. You are anchored in yourself, and that is why I understand your point. But I disagree is not just a sentence, it is a declaration of inner authority. Before we move forward to the next phrase, I want you to pause and reflect. How many times in your life have you stayed silent when you should have spoken? How many times have you shouted when you should have spoken calmly? This phrase gives you the middle ground, the bridge between silence and rage. Now I want you to do something. Write in the comments right now. I understand your point, but I disagree. Not just as words, but as a reminder to yourself that from today you no longer need to raise your voice to be respected. You only need to align your words with your inner truth. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because in the next part, I will reveal a phrase so powerful that it can completely transform how even your harshest critics see you. In the first part, you discovered that the simple phrase, I understand your point, but I disagree, carries within it an entire philosophy of self-respect and inner alignment. It allows you to acknowledge another person without surrendering your independence. But one phrase alone cannot cover the entire spectrum of human interaction. There are moments when people cross lines, moments when you must protect your dignity with clarity and firmness. This brings us to phrase 2. I don't find that appropriate. At first, this phrase might seem almost cold, but that is precisely its power. It is unshakable, simple, and very difficult to challenge. Imagine someone makes a cruel joke at your expense or says something offensive in a group setting. The most common reactions are either to stay silent, betraying your own discomfort, or to respond with anger, which only fuels conflict. But when you calmly say, I don't find that appropriate, you send a shockwave through the room. Carl Jung often spoke about the necessity of drawing boundaries, not just against others, but against the darker aspects of ourselves. This phrase is a psychological boundary. It communicates that you will not allow disrespect to define the interaction. You are signaling that your dignity is not negotiable. Seneca wrote, "He who respects himself will be respected by others." And with this phrase, you embody that principle. Notice how it works. There is no insult, no escalation, no need for justification. It is pure boundary setting, clean and firm. You don't explain why you find it inappropriate. You simply declare it. And that clarity leaves the other person with no room to hide. They are forced to reconsider their behavior because you refuse to play the game of offense and defense now. I want you to type in the comments, I don't find that appropriate. Write it as a reminder that from this moment forward, you will no longer allow others to set the standard for what you must tolerate. You set the standard. Phrase 3, let's talk when we can do so respectfully. This phrase is not just about stopping a conversation, it's about taking control of it. Jung believed that one of the greatest tasks of individuation is learning to live in relationship without being consumed by the will of others. Relationships, whether personal or professional, can easily become battlegrounds of ego. When someone raises their voice, interrupts you constantly, or speaks with hostility, the temptation is to meet them with the same energy. But when you breathe deeply and calmly say, "Let's talk when we can do so respectfully," you shift the entire dynamic. You are no longer at the mercy of their emotions. Instead, you have taken the steering wheel. You did not run away. You did not submit. You established the condition. Respect, Epictetus said, "You may fetter my leg, but my will not even Zeus himself can overpower." In other words, you cannot control others, but you can control your response. Jung would echo this truth. The conscious individual does not react blindly, but responds from a place of awareness. This phrase is a pure example of that principle. The first time you use it, you may be surprised at the silence that follows. The aggressor suddenly realizes they are no longer in control. The balance of power has shifted. And more importantly, you have shown everyone around you, perhaps even yourself, that you refuse to live on terms of disrespect. Now I want you to take this phrase and claim it as your own. Write in the comments, "Let's talk when we can do so respectfully," because once you internalize this phrase, every toxic interaction in your life will begin to lose its grip on you. Phrase 4. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. This phrase is the verbal equivalent of locking a door. And sometimes silence is not enough. Sometimes you must consciously withdraw your energy from something that is draining you. Jung spoke about psychic energy as a limited force. Wherever you direct your attention, you are feeding that thing. If you give your energy to endless arguments, toxic people, or pointless debates, you are starving your soul of the energy it needs for growth. Imagine being in a conversation with someone who is not searching for truth, but for victory. They argue for the sake of pride, twisting words, refusing to listen. You can feel the heaviness in your chest, the frustration building. At that moment, you look them in the eye and calmly say, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation." You are not running away. You are choosing where your energy flows. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And that is exactly what you achieve here. You refuse to mirror pettiness with pettiness. You refuse to let someone else dictate the terms of your inner state. The impact is profound. The conversation ends on your terms. The other person realizes they cannot control you, and you walk away with your dignity intact. Jung would call this individuation, choosing authenticity over collective pressure, protecting your psyche from contamination. So, write it down now in the comments. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation, not just as words, but as a declaration that from now on, you will conserve your energy for what truly matters. Phrase 5. That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it. This phrase is a masterpiece of balance. It holds courtesy in one hand and firmness in the other. You acknowledge the other person's humanity. You respect their right to hold an opinion. But you also assert your independence without apology. Picture a friend, a colleague, or even a family member trying to convince you of something you know you cannot accept. Instead of arguing point by point, instead of exhausting yourself in endless debate, you calmly respond, "That's your opinion and I respect it, but I don't share it." With that, you close the door to manipulation. You free yourself from the prison of needing to please others. Seneca called this the worst of prisons, living by the opinions of others. Jung would say this is the triumph of individuation, when you are no longer enslaved by external validation, but live in alignment with your inner truth. This phrase preserves the relationship while affirming your independence. It is not hostile, yet it is unmovable. And once you begin using it, you will notice how people start to treat you differently. They may not agree with you, but they will respect the unshakable sense of self that radiates from you. Now let's anchor this into your mind. Write in the comments, "That's your opinion and I respect it, but I don't share it." Let the act of writing it remind you that you are no longer a prisoner of other people's expectations. So now you have 5 phrases, 5 psychological tools that transform how others see you. I understand your point, but I disagree. I don't find that appropriate. Let's talk when we can do so respectfully. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. That's your opinion, and I respect it. But I don't share it. Each one is simple, but each one reflects a deep truth about human psychology. Respect is not imposed through force. It is inspired through character. Jung believed that when you integrate your shadow, align with yourself, and act from authenticity, the world cannot help but recognize your authority. These phrases are not tricks. They are reflections of that deeper work, and this is why they work. Because they are not only words, they are symbols of an integrated self. They are the language of someone who has mastered the art of self-respect. If you want to continue learning how to speak, think, and act with the wisdom of Carl Jung and the great philosophers, subscribe now and turn on the notifications. This journey is only beginning, and I promise you, the more you integrate these lessons, the more you will see your life transform. And before you leave, tell me in the comments which of these 5 phrases you're going to use first. I will be waiting to read your answers.